Yamuna Tira Banachari, Yamuna Tira Banachari, Jaya Radha Madhava Kunyadi Hari, 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 Gopijana Balabha Giri Varadhari, Jaya Gopijana Balabha Giri Varadhari, Yasodanandana Brajadanadan Yasodanandana Brajadana Yamuna Tira Banachari, Yamuna Tira Banachari, Jaya Radha Madhava Kunyadi Hari, Jaya Radha Madhava Kunyadi Hari, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. This morning we're reading, what's written there? 7? Okay, I was told 6, but anyway. 7 and 8 probably. Yada Sabayam Kurudeva Devya Kesha Bhimasham Sutakarmagaryam Navarayam Ashan Vipas Nushaya Spasre Harantya Kuchakunkumani Yada Sabayam Kurudeva Devya Kesha Bhimasham Sutakarmagaryam Navarayamashan Ripasnushaya Spasre Harantya Akuchakunkumani Yada, when? Sabayam, the assembly. Kurudeva Devya, of Draupadi, the wife of godly Yudhisthira. Kesha Abhimarsham, insult by grabbing her hair. Sutakarma, action taken by his son. Garbhyam, which was abominable. Na, did not. Varayamasha, forbid. Nripa, the king. Snushaya, of his nephew's wife. Spasrai, by her tears. Harantya, of she who was washing. Kuchakunkumani, red dust on her breast. Translation: the king did not forbid his son Dushashan's abominable action of grabbing the hair of Draupadi, the wife of the godly king Yudhisthira, even though her tears washed the red dust on her breast. Text 8. Jutit vadharmena jitasya sadho satyavalambasya vanam gatasya nayachato dat samayena dayam tamo jushano yat ajata satro. Translation: Yudhisthira, who was born without any enemy, was unfairly defeated in gambling, but because he had taken the vow of truthfulness, he went off to the forest. When he came back in due course and begged the return of his rightful share of the kingdom, he was refused by Dhritarashtra, who was overwhelmed by illusion. Purport: Maharaj Yudhisthira was the rightful heir to his father's kingdom, but just to favour his own sons, headed by Duryodhana, Dhritarashtra, Maharaj Yudhisthira's uncle, adopted various unfair means to cheat his nephews of their rightful share of the kingdom. At last, the Pandavas demanded only 5 villages, one for each of the 5 brothers, but that was also refused by the usurpers. This incident led to the war of Kurukshetra. The battle of Kurukshetra, therefore, was introduced by the Kurus and not the Pandavas. As Kshatriyas, the proper livelihood of the Pandavas was only to rule and not to accept any other occupation. A Brahmana, Kshatriya or Vaishya will not accept employment for his livelihood under any circumstances. So Sukadeva Goswami is speaking about King Dhritarashtra and pointing out King Dhritarashtra, and I've mentioned this before in this section of the Bhagavatam, that Prabhupada was very critical of King Dhritarashtra because he didn't take sufficient means to curb his son, and more or less aided him in his plots to to kill the Pandavas, impious desires to nourish his dishonoured sons was the statement by Sukadeva Goswami. So Prabhupada was critical, and Sukadeva Goswami is also very critical of King Dhritarashtra, although we could say Duryodhana was the main protagonist. He was the main architect of the killing, going right back. Now it goes right back to, if we retrace the history a little bit, you can go right back to Maharaj Shantanu, really more or less kind of start Maharaj Shantanu and his marriage to Ganga Devi, and then of course Bhishma was the eighth son who ended up as the son of Shantanu and Ganga Devi, because Ganga Devi went back to the heavenly planets and Bhishma stayed as the son. Of course he didn't marry, and the Ganga Devi had left and gone back to the heavenly planets. And so King Shantanu married again, and he married Satyavati. And with Satyavati he had two sons. Satyavati, one was named Maharaj Chitrangada, and the other was with Maharaj Vichitravirya. They were the two sons. So Chitrangada was killed by a Gandhava of the same name. He had the same namesake, and so there was a challenge there, a duel, more or less, and Maharaj Chitrangada lost. He was killed by the Gandhava in that fight. So he was the king, and so he was defeated and killed in the duel. And then so Vichitravirya became the king. Now Vichitravirya didn't reign very long because he died, I remember, from consumption or some disease like that. What? Right, which is consumption, yeah, tuberculosis. So Vichitravirya died early. So then there were no children. There were no sons in the family. And so she requested Srila Vyasadeva to come, who was actually her first son in her union with Parasara Muni, her secret union with Parasara Muni. Srila Vyasadeva was born, but of course he was an ascetic, a great rishi. He left home. So she called him to have union with the wives, wasn't it, of Vichitravirya. He had three wives, wasn't it? If I'm correct. Ambika, Amba, Ambika, and Ambalika were the three wives. And so that was a kind of a system. If the husband was barren and there was no, and especially with the kings, the royal order, the lineage was very, very important. The lineage, the heir, they would be trained. They would be, their blood was very strong, and they would be trained from the youth, so that the heir, who was going to be the heir, these were not ordinary persons. They were very extraordinary. So it was very, very important. So then they had the tradition where the brother could come. If the one brother, the husband was barren, then the brother could be asked to conceive with the wife. So that was a kind of a tradition. So she called Vyasadeva, and he came. Of course, as the story goes, you can read this, everyone. This is quite a well-known story in the Mahabharata. That when Vyasadeva, because he'd been practicing tapasya and austerities in the forest, and so he was very gaunt-looking and very harsh-looking, and so when he approached Amba to have union, to conceive with her, she closed her eyes. And so it is said, because of that, you closed your eyes, therefore your child will be blind. Your child will be blind. So that was Dhritarashtra. Dhritarashtra was born blind. And then, of course, Vyasadeva approached Ambika, and Ambika became pale when she saw him. He was so harsh looking. And so it is said that that child will be born pale, and he was a little anemic also, although he was very powerful, but he suffered various illnesses. And that was Pandu. So he was very pale, and so. But Pandu, and of course, when Vyasadeva approached Ambalika, she didn't even want to have union with him, and she sent a maidservant in the darkened room, because Vasudev knew all that. But he was pleased by the maidservant, and he had union with the maidservant, of course, and who was saying that someone was giving the class. You were giving the class. Vidura, yeah. Vidura was the result of that union. So we have that story going right back from Mara Shantanu, Bhishma, to Chitrangada, Vichitravirya, and then Dhritarashtra, Pandu. Dhritarashtra being blind, he didn't take the throne, even though he was the elder. He couldn't take the throne because of his incapacity of being blind. So Pandu actually became the emperor. But the whole story of the Pandu also died early. He was hunting in the forest, and there's this whole story that he shot an arrow. He thought he saw a couple of deer there, but they were a rishi and his wife in the form of the deers having union, and he shot them and killed them, and the rishi cursed him, when you approach your wife, you will also die. So he died. There's a whole, what a history. Not much luck here in this family. But anyway, so he died early, before that, because of that curse, Pandu had decided to renounce the throne, and he just went into the forest, into the mountains to practice, to live with his, because he was married to Kunti and Madri, and they just lived there like a hermitage, and the Pandavas were born, Kunti had that mantra, everything like that. And then when he died, of course, Bhishma and all the elders came out from Hastinapur, and they actually performed the funeral ceremony there in the mountain. And then that's when the Pandavas came back in. And then they were trained up, and that's Dronacharya came in, and he trained the boys along with other teachers as well, but he was the main guru as far as teaching them in so many different ways. The princes were really educated and taught right from their youth, and so he taught them. And Guru Dakshin, he had a thing with the Drupada. He sent them to defeat Drupada, and then the Duryodhana and his brothers couldn't defeat Drupada, but Arjuna defeated Drupada and presented him to Dronacharya, and so Dronacharya took half the kingdom, and there was a whole story there. But right after that, now it starts kind of here, right after that, when Yudhisthira came back, it wasn't long after the training and everything, it was at that time that Bhishma said, now that Yudhisthira has come of age, he is the elder, he is the eldest son of Pandu, he is the rightful heir to the kingdom, he should be made the crown prince. He should be made the crown prince. And it was then that Duryodhana already had some, a lot of resentment going back even before that, because especially Bhimsen used to terrorize all the boys, because he was so big and strong. He used to chase them around and throw them down and yank on their hair and all this type of stuff. Of course, he was just joking, but Duryodhana especially, and a few of his brothers, didn't like it. It was kind of demeaning and humiliating. So it was at that time also that he made a plan to kill them. There's that story of the poison cake. He set up, there's a fair and go there go to the summer palace, and then he got the cooks to poison the food, and he fed him the cake. There's a whole story there about, even then, going right back even further, but especially when he was, Bhishma asked that Yudhisthira be the crown prince. And then Duryodhana said, well, that's now very formal now. And so his resentment just grew exponentially, just very, very powerfully, very strong. And it was at that time that he had planned just to kill all of them, kill Yudhisthira, before he wanted to kill Bhima. And he thought if he could kill Bhima by poisoning him, because Bhima came out even stronger, that he poisoned him with a poisoned cake. And then Bhima just fell unconscious, and at night time he tied him up, and he rolled him into the river, and there was poisonous snakes in the river that came and bit him all over, and but their venom kind of counteracted the poison that he digested, and so and then he awoke again, and then he beat off the snakes, and then some of them went running back to Vashuki, and then Vashuki offered him that nectar, that he offered him that nectar of the serpents. It was a type of rathayan. It was a type of rathayan. There's a whole story there about the 8 vessels of the nectar of the serpents. These were heavenly serpents, Vasuki and all that. And so he offered him that. And then he drank just one vessel, and that's how he became even more powerful. He became even more powerful. So instead of killing him, Bhima came out even more powerful. That really infuriated Duryodhana. They were rejoicing and everything like that, and then he came back even stronger. But then when Yudhishthira was named the crown prince, and now I have to get rid of them, so he hatched the plan to burn them, and burn them alive in a special, who was that person? Purochana. Purochana was the person who was designated to be the chief architect of building this big palace that would house the Pandavas, but he made it out of that wax, that lac, very flammable material. And the plan was to send them there if there was a big fair or something like that, go there and live in there and build it like that. And so I think it was on the dark night. See, this careful planning. Wasn't even going to be a moonlight, just like last night with moonlight, you could see everything. On the dark night, he was going to set it when they're all sleeping, going to set it alight. But Vidura cottoned onto that plan and sent a message there, and then sent some miner there who dug a tunnel underneath. Yudhishthira decided to just secretly go out and for some time not disclose the whole thing. And so, this section here deals with all these atrocities committed by Duryodhana, who is just the envy in his heart, the jealousy in the heart. And Dhritarashtra also is accused by Sukadev Goswami, also Srila Prabhupada mentions, became blind. He was blind from birth, in the previous verse, blind from birth, but also blind as far as actually understanding Krishna's position, understanding true spirituality. This blindness comes about, as mentioned, by impious desires. Impious desire. Your desires cover your heart and just cover you. Just like in the Gita is mentioned, just like what is it mentioned? The fire is covered by smoke, and the mirror is covered by dust, and the embryo is covered by the womb. This is all the different degrees of the lust and the desire. Desire, isn't it? That the fire by smoke is like the humans who have got some maybe underneath, they've got some Krishna consciousness that gets brought out. And then of course the trees and that, and they're like the mirror covered by dust, and no, the trees are in the womb. There, that's that analogy is like that. Anyway, so our desire covers our ability to understand spirituality. Now, in the Bhagavad Gita, I've mentioned this before, Prabhupada talks about the 2 weaknesses of heart of the conditioned soul. And he says one weakness of heart is the desire to lord it over, to control and to lord it over. And the other weakness of heart is the desire to accumulate more and more possessions. These are 2 weaknesses of heart of the conditioned soul. And it's very strong, especially in the Kshatriyas. Now all conditioned souls have it, but especially in the Kshatriya types, they want to control not only themselves and immediate, but of course they want to control kingdoms. That is just their nature. to control, to lord it over. Lord it over is very strong. It's a kind of a psycho-physical nature is like that. So it is a weakness, yet that is their nature. And so that is one, and then more and more possession. So of course Duryodhana had this very strong, he thought he should be the king and rule, the emperor, and he couldn't brook even the thought of anyone else taking that, especially Bhimsen, and especially even Yudhisthira. Ajatasattu is mentioned here in the verse today, that even Yudhisthira, whose enemy was not born, he was such a pious king. He was just so qualified a personality, and it was his rightful position to accept that a position as king. So Duryodhana, of course, was not going to tolerate that, and Dhritarashtra allowed so many things allowed him to perpetuate so many atrocities on the Pandavas, on Yudhisthira, and today is mentioned about the gambling match and the dice. Now we go back even further here with Shakuni. Shakuni had this dice. I mentioned the other week, I think last week when I gave the class about Yudhisthira Maharaj when they were incognito. He before they went incognito in the forest, Yudhisthira had learned from a rishi. He had got a certain mantra how to play dice, and by chanting this mantra, when you threw the dice, they'd come up any number that you chose in your mind by this mantra. So Yudhisthira being defeated in the gambling match. But Shakuni had a real grudge against the Kaurava dynasty, because especially he had a grudge against Bhishma, because Bhishma had forced the three Amba, Ambika, and Balika to marry Dhritarashtra. He'd taken them by force to marry him. Well, first of all, he asked, but then, of course, now the parents were all right with it, but the Shakuni, being the elder brother, he was against it. So, and especially with Amba, wasn't it Amba who, she wanted to marry Bhishma, but he refused her, and then she was... What's that? Huh? What? She was already betrothed to Jarasandha. Oh, right. He would accept it because right, there's a whole intrigue there, yeah. So anyway, he had this grudge, and he just begrudged Bhishma, and actually he took a vow to destroy the whole dynasty. Took a vow to destroy the whole Kaurava dynasty, and he had to. So it goes right back to Shakuni, and it's mentioned in the Mahabharata in different places. So Shakuni was always in the ear of Duryodhana, always in the back of Duryodhana. So you see what happens when the heart is covered by all these desires and so on and so forth. And it makes one blind to anything else. So here it is mentioned in the previous verse that Dhritarashtra was blind, physically blind, but he was blind because of his impious desires. Certainly, desires are pious or impious. Pious desires are when the progressive development of human life, especially on the spiritual path, and you have desires for that, that's considered pious desires. But when your desires are devious and duplicitous, and there's jealousy and envy and manipulation and so on and so forth, at any cost, get what you want, And Prabhupada says actually the epitome of this is that when you really get the epitome and of this is that I live, you die. So this is the, as long as I live, and everyone can die, right? I don't care if everyone dies as long as I live. Right, so that's really getting, focused. That's just so self-absorbed. So self-absorbed. Then as you go lower in the species of life, you'll find in the lower species of life, they're just absorbed in their own position. They don't think about anything else, just themselves. And so, when you get that in human life, which is not meant, human life is meant to be a more broader, understand broader thing. But when you've got a person like that, very self-absorbed, just thinking about themselves, and you don't care, everyone else can suffer and they can even die, doesn't matter, as long as I live and enjoy. And so I will do it at any cost, as long as I get ahead, everyone else can go down. So when you have that type of desire, when you have that covering you, you're spiritually blind. And Prabhupada actually mentions that this is more disastrous than being physically. You may be physically fit and healthy, but if you're blind spiritually, this is far detrimental than having disabilities physically. You may have disabilities physically, and Prabhupada makes a point of it, this was in the previous purport, that you can have physical disability, you may be blind, but still you can make spiritual advancement in some way or other. But if you're blind spiritually, then it's very difficult to help such a person. Very envious, jealous person. Just like, what is that example, feeding the snake milk and bananas, right? What does it do? So someone who's very, very envious, very, very jealous person, you may try to be friendly, you may try to help them, but actually, and quite often this is the case, so we've all experienced that, you just try to help this person, but because they're so envious, so jealous, they attack you. And I gave the example of last week of the scorpion who wanted to ride across the river on the back of the camel. And the camel said, "No, you're a scorpion. You're going to sting me with your poison." And the river flood water was coming up. No, why would I do that? Then we'll both die. So then halfway across the river, the scorpion bit him anyway. I said, "Why do you do that for?" The camel said, "I'm a scorpion. I couldn't help myself." So some people just can't help it. They just can't help it. And they're so self-absorbed, so filled up with envy and jealousy. Very, very difficult for them to understand spirituality. They have to purify themselves. The only thing, you have to become purified. You have to hear these messages. The beauty of the Krishna consciousness is that it's simultaneously the means and the end. The end is to become fully pure in devotion and love to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And the means to attain that is to engage in the process, is to engage in hearing and chanting. Now, interestingly enough, Sukadev Goswami, or Sutta Goswami, actually mentioned that he heard these descriptions with rapt attention from this word rapt attention. From Sukadev, when Sukadev Goswami was instructing Parikshit Maharaj, Sutta Goswami was there. So it's a place called Sukrata. It's just, you can go there on the way to Kurukshetra off to the side. Holy place. So Sutta Goswami was there. So he heard with rapt attention. Now, to hear with rapt attention, and rather Krishna says the same thing at the end of Tvayaka Gena Chetasam, Katchit etach chutampata tvayaka gena cha katchit agana sama pranasaste dhananja. Now Krishna asked Arjuna, after giving so many instructions to Arjuna, Krishna asked Arjuna, have you heard this with an attentive mind? Are your ignorance and illusions now dispelled? Have you heard with an attentive mind? And Prabhupada in his purport elaborates, he said that Krishna was speaking and he was ready to re-explain any point, or the whole Bhagavad Gita if necessary. This is the business of a teacher. That because pupils learn at different levels. And so Krishna asks the question, did you hear with an attentive mind? So hearing with an attentive mind is very, very important. But no, not everyone can do it. Well, who can do it who is a conditioned soul? No one can do it. We have to understand this point. It is ideal to hear with rapt attention, but you can never do it until you're fully pure. I always remember in school, the teachers would always say, pay attention. What do you do? Pay attention. I remember getting a duster thrown at my head one time because I was staring out the window. Pay attention. Those days, of course you can't do it these days. The teachers can't do that time. But in those days they used to do it. You had the duster mark, the chalk mark on the side of my head. Pay attention. But everyone's mind will wander. Why? Because of this covering. We're not pure. So Prabhupada actually makes a point in one purport in the first canto. He makes a point that no one can be pure. One has to have a pure mind, but no one can have a pure mind. No one can give rapt attention unless they've got a pure mind. And no one can have a pure mind unless they're pure in action. And no one can be pure in action unless they're pure in their habits of eating and sleeping, mating and defending, and engaging in spiritual life. So we haven't got a pure mind. But as I said, the process of Krishna consciousness is so nice. By practicing it, you'll get a pure mind, and the result will be you'll be in purity to practice more of it. But just you'll practice more of it on the higher level. So when the instruction is given, yes, hear with a pure mind, that is the ideal. But none of us can give a pure mind. But by hearing, just by sitting in the class and hearing it, by engaging in devotional, we're going to be purified. We're going to be purified. And I've said a few times that at my initiation, there was a few of us there, and Prabhupada said, now you're being initiated, you have to become pure as quickly as possible. Pure as quickly as possible, he said. I always remember that. So we have to become purified. Then we can give rapt attention. Otherwise, no matter how hard we try, we can't. But still, the effort has to be there. So therefore the acharyas stress on it. One has to give rapt attention. Have you heard all this with an attentive mind? Nasto moha shmiti labda tat prasadamayacha. So this is Arjuna answers. He says, yes, by your mercy, tat prasadamayacha. Stitosmi gata sane karishya vachanam dava. Karishya vachanam, I have heard and I have understood, and he was very intelligent. I am prepared to act according to your instructions. So this is intelligence. But Dhritarashtra, even though he was getting good counsel from so many, Vidura, Bhishma, Drona, so many were giving him good advice. Don't treat the Pandavas like this. Don't allow these things. You know what your son's doing. Why? But even though he couldn't hear it. He couldn't accept it because of an over attachment to his own sons. This weakness of heart, desire to control everything. You can control directly, or you can control through someone else. So this controlling, Dhritarashtra was controlling through his son. So it was still in him. One could argue, and Dhritarashtra used to say this. He actually, when Krishna tried to convince him, one of Dhritarashtra's arguments was, what can I do? It's my son. My son's doing all these things. What can I do? He just won't listen to me. But actually he could do. He could do if he wanted to do, but he didn't want to do because of excessive attachment, desire to lord over, desire to... So he was controlling everything through his son, and he was allowing it. So this was very atrocious, and especially all these things combined together. And then when Draupadi was insulted, that was a real big thing. And then when Dushan grabbed her hair, of course Bhima made the vow he's going to cut that arm right off, and he did later on. And then wasn't it that Duryodhana also slapped his foot? You're our slave now. Come and sit on my lap. And then Duryodhana, and Bhima said, see that thigh that you're slapping, I'm going to crush it. So that insult, Draupadi's insult, That was a real big one. And then later on, when I said last week, when who was it that was sent? It was the secretary, Sanjaya, went to give a message from Dhritarashtra to invite the Pandavas to Hastinapur, but Yudhisthira didn't accept it because, well, you're inviting, but you're not answering our request. Our request, just give us half our kingdom back at least, because they'd come out of exile and they'd done their year incognito. So now Yudhisthira was requesting half the kingdom, and so when Sanjaya presented Dhritarashtra's invitation, Yudhisthira couldn't accept it. Well, you're offering so many other things, but you're not offering what we requested. So he couldn't accept that. And then he said, at least give back half the kingdom. And then if you can't give, at least give us 5 villages. So then when that was brought back, and Duryodhana was there at that time, that's when he said that, as I said last week, he said, I won't give them the amount of land that even a pin can prick. This is Duryodhana. This is how envious. When you get very envious, you can't even stand to see someone. They're just so envious of them, so jealous of them. You can't bear to be in their presence. So Duryodhana was actually like that. He got himself into a tizzy. You can work yourself up into a tizzy about all this type of thing. The jealousy and envy and anger. You just work yourself up that you just even someone speaks the name. Ooh, don't say that name. So Duryodhana was like that. He didn't even do Bhimsena, don't even speak the name. Yudhisthira, don't even speak the Pandavas. Yeah, I won't give them even the land that could fit on the tip of the needle. So he was so worked up. So actually, now Prabhupada actually says here that really when that was refused and Krishna went there and tried to make peace and everything like that, it was all refused, and that's really okay. You're not even going to give us 5 villages. We want, was first of all, give us half the kingdom. No. Give us Indraprastha back. What we had before, that nice, beautiful. No. Give us 5 villages. No. Nothing. Not going to get anything. And so, all right, so there has to be war. And that Krishna said, when Duryodhana made that statement, he said, this is my final statement on this matter. Duryodhana actually said that. When he said, I won't give them the land that can fit on a pin. He said, this is my final statement. This is my final conclusion on this matter. So then Krishna didn't mince words, so therefore there must be war. Krishna said, therefore there must be. Of course, Krishna knew all along it would be. But anyway, he went through the motions of trying to do the peace. And he always gives the people opportunity to make amends. But anyway, so therefore Prabhupada mentions here, this is really what sparked the whole thing, this final refusal. And Dhritarashtra was sitting in the back. He could have taken steps to avert this whole thing. So, but no, he didn't. So therefore Prabhupada says here that Sukadeva Goswami himself says Dhritarashtra was totally overwhelmed by illusion and impious desires, and therefore everyone had to suffer. And so many millions and millions of people died in this Kurukshetra war. All right, thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Yes, personally. He didn't, sorry, he didn't.
It was Dhritarashtra's fault that he didn't create his own son Duryodhana. So we also hear sometimes like spiritual masters or authorities, they don't instruct someone because they can't take it. So then where is that responsibility lie? Because it seems like it's both sides.
Well, no, the spiritual master, they're thinking things in balance. that what's going to be worse. And the Prabhupada, there's a few instances where Prabhupada spoke to devotees about this. What's the balance? If I instruct me, he's going to be offensive, and he's going to maybe be insulting to the Guru. So what's going to be worse? That or not instructing him? So the Gurus are always weighing up what's going to be best for going forward in the Krishna consciousness. So that's another thing altogether. So therefore, so one has to always consider strongly saying something. What's going to be the effect of saying something or taking certain action? So that's how the Gurus think in that regard. So Prabhupada himself actually mentioned that on quite a few occasions, why he spoke heavily with someone, just like, for example, one of our godbrothers, Tamar Krishna Maharaj, he was instructed fairly heavily, you have to go to China. So Prabhupada chastised him in front of everyone. Stand up, I was there. Stand up, he said. Stand up. But obviously he knew that was good for him, that he was advanced enough to be able to take that, and it was also the effect would be, and he followed it, and he went to China and became successful. But in other cases, Prabhupada decided not to go ahead, and it all depended on the individual who was being instructed or who was the object of consideration. So the Gurus are considering like that. What is the balance of what type of effect is going to happen here? Because, if someone gets offensive to the Guru and insults the Guru or all sorts of things, that's going to be more detrimental. Krishna doesn't like that. The Guru is very tolerant and humble. He'll tolerate, but Krishna doesn't like it. So Guru knows that. Krishna won't like this, so I don't want my disciple to suffer like that. So therefore they have to consider all those things. There are a lot of considerations there. One final comment, question? Yes.
Just on that story about Krishna, after Prabhupada spoke to him very heavily, then in 1977, this Krishna became Prabhupada's permanent secretary.
He what?
Became Prabhupada's permanent secretary.
Oh yeah. So at the very next moment, just like today's Mukunda Datta's disappearance day, there's one story about that. I mean, he was a childhood friend of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And they went to school together. And he's very famous as a beautiful singer and everything, a beautiful kirtan leader. But he was known to mix in there with the Mayavadis sometimes. So one time Mukunda Dutt came to see Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. They were very close. They were like childhood friends. And that in the Krishna Leela also before. And so Mukunda Datta wants to come in. No, I'm not allowing him in. So he has to be outside because he mixes with the Mayavadi. He comes in, does kirtan and speaks to everyone about devotion, then he goes and mixes with the Mayavadi. So he can't come in. So then he won't be able to see me very soon, he said. That was his statement, right? So Mukunda Dutt, he was very happy. Well, at least he's going to see me soon at some time. All right, I won't come in, but at least soon. So then later on, when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu heard that, and then he heard that Mukunda Datta said, all right, I won't mix with any others. He said, all right, you can come back in. So it wasn't very long after. He can't come in, and then at the next moment, then he was allowed to back in again. So so there's an instance there, and it just happens to be the Mukunda Datta's disappearance anniversary today. So I thought I'd tell that story. All right, thank you very much. Hare Krishna, Jai, all glories to Srila Prabhupada ki Jai, Nitai Gaur Premanandi, Hari Hari Bol.